Hello and welcome to episode 40 of the Music Behind the Magic podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Goodman, and as always, I want to celebrate with each and every one of you the magic of Disney songs, scores, and soundtracks from the movies to the parks. So, when you think about the music that we hear in Disney films, it's relatively easy to say, oh, Alan Menken wrote that song, or hey, Hanz Zimmer composed that score. And of course, those legendary songwriters and composers are responsible for crafting the melody, the vision, and the structure of that amazing music that we know and love. But beyond that, within film music, there are musicians that work with those composers and songwriters to provide the depth, emotional resonance, and instrumentation that truly bring those songs to life. Those are the orchestrators and arrangers. And today we are incredibly fortunate to be joined by someone that's actually done it all: composed, arranged, and orchestrated many of the most popular and beloved songs and scores in Disney history, from Frozen to Moana, and from The Lion King on Broadway to Mufasa the Lion King on the big screen, Dave Metzger. Dave tells us all about his musical journey and how he contributed to the musical magic of so many movies that we love. Before we dive in, I just want to take the opportunity to thank you for listening and joining us for this 40th episode. It's a big landmark for me especially, and whether you've listened from the beginning or just checking out us for the first time, it's great to have you wherever you may be in the world. If you enjoy this podcast, please like and subscribe and share it with a friend, family member, or coworker who might enjoy it too. And please, if you have a few seconds, and only if you think I've earned it, leave a good rating and review to help others discover it too. You can always reach out to me at jonathan@musicbehindthemagic.com or on Instagram at musicbehindthemagic, and also check out our Facebook group for fun topics, news, and conversations. And as I've mentioned for the past few weeks, as a reminder, I've recently become a brand ambassador for Find the Good, which is a clothing and apparel company that helps reinforce good habits for mental health and well-being. Mental health is something that affects many, many families, including my own. And I appreciate the company's mission and the fact that it donates 10% of its profits to the nonprofit Mental Health America. If you check out the website and want to order something at findthegoodbrand.com, you can use the code MusicBehindTheMagic to get 10% off of your order. With that, I invite you to think more deeply and give a closer listen to some of your favorite Disney songs. The emotional orchestration of Let It Go, the yearning of discovery of How Far I'll Go, and the power of love in You'll Be in My Heart. And enjoy this episode of the Music Behind the Magic podcast. We are so very pleased to be joined today by Dave Metzger. Dave is composer, arranger, and orchestrator, whose credits include composing the scores for Mufasa the Lion King, Wish, Once Upon a Studio, Brother Bear 2, and Tarzan 2. He's also a highly regarded song arranger and orchestrator, having crafted the songs for many films we love, including the Academy Award-winning Frozen, Tarzan, Frozen 2, Moana, Wish, and Spirited. Many of the songs, film soundtracks, and Broadway cast albums that Dave has worked on have won Academy, Grammy, and Tony Awards, among them Let It Go from Frozen, How Far I'll Go from Moana, You'll Be My Heart from Tarzan, as well as the Tarzan and Frozen soundtracks and the cast album from The Lion King. In the world of theater, Davis was nominated for the Tony Award for Best Orchestrations for the Tony Award-winning The Lion King. He has also orchestrated the Broadway version of Frozen. And I love this. Along with having worked on 11 of the 62 Disney animated films ever produced, Dave has also worked for studios as diverse as Apple Original Films, Marvel, Sony, DreamWorks, Paramount, and Warner Brothers. Dave, thank you so much for joining with us today. It's so good to have you on.
Oh, Jonathan, thank you so much for thinking of inviting me to speak with you today. I appreciate that very much.
I am so excited to chat. You've worked on so many things that so many people love and cherish. So I've been super excited to chat with you about it. And as I mentioned at the beginning, you've had an incredible career within Disney as well as outside of Disney. But maybe we just take a step back. Would love to learn about you and your musical background and how you were able to make music a career for yourself.
Yeah, cool. Well, I got started kinda early. I started writing when I was 12 years old, and, I was really fortunate. I, had didn't before that, I didn't have any music experience. I was the typical kid, that I took about a month of piano lessons when I was 5 or 6 years old and completely rebelled, and so my parents gave up, but,
Totally.
and I kinda regret that now. I'm really a really horrible piano player, and I wish I I would've stuck with a little bit better and had a little bit more of that experience, so through grade school, I just, did the normal thing of most kids. The one thing that was different is my mom always listened to music. Neither of my parents were musicians at all.
Mm,
In fact, my dad was completely tone deaf. He could only recognize the Star Spangled Banner, and this is the truth, by the words. If he heard the music, he wouldn't recognize that that's what it was. So it's kinda a little odd in that regard, but going into 7th grade, I actually wanted to take a woodshop class, and that class was full, so the administration at the school just sort of randomly put me in this choir class, and it, turned out that the teacher of that class was one of the top composers of, choral music for, junior high, choirs throughout the United States of America. So I really kind of fell into this, wonderful exposure, and I realized at the very beginning, the first couple of months that much of the music we were singing was music she had written. And somehow that just sparked something to me. So I went home at Christmas vacation, that first 7th grade year and did an arrangement straight from my head to sheet music of Barbara Ann, the old Jan and Dean song, and, it's just like a very simple four-part, arrangement, but I took it into her, when, school started back up in January, and she saw something there that there might be, something, to, encourage, and so she, very much became my mentor and took me under her wing. So, and it was to the point, and at that point, I caught the bug. So I just kept writing, and she would, whenever I would write anything, she would perform it. Well, she would rehearse it and take the class time to read through anything. And then it got to the point where in 8th grade, she would schedule or program some of my stuff on concerts at the school concerts. And by the time I got to 9th grade, she was doing at like there's choir festivals where you go around state contests or different things like that. And so she would perform my works then.
wow.
So I was already getting a lot of great exposure by the time I was in 9th grade. And I have a sister that's 2 years older than me, and she was in the band program then in high school. So when I was in 8th grade, I got kind of hooked on big band music, and I'm talking like Buddy Rich, Woody Herman, Count Basie, that kind of big band. And so
Sure.
I started transcribing big band charts when I was in 8th grade then, and and had my first year of college music theory when I was in 9th grade, at Oregon State University. I grew up in Corvallis, Oregon, and, then switched over to the band program in high school, and then started writing, nonstop for concert band and jazz band. Again, I was very fortunate, I had an incredible band director who, like, similarly, anything that I would write, he would take the time to rehearse and then would play them on concerts and likewise, play them at, festivals, band festivals around the Northwest. We did a lot in, Washington. We went up to, festivals up in Washington and stuff, but
Sure.
so I was just so incredibly fortunate that I fell into this program in Corvallis, Oregon, where the music, teachers were just really incredible, encouraged me, nurtured me, mentored me, hooked me up with the Oregon State, music theory, and all that kind of stuff. And then another really pivotal thing for me was in when I was 16 years old was when the first Star Wars movie came out, Episode 4, which
Of
is the
course.
yeah, A New
Episode
Hope.
4 is the first one. Yeah.
Yeah, and that just blew me away, and so at that point, I knew I really wanted to be a film composer, and so, really, I've had the bug since then, and that's, golly, 50 years ago. Oh.
I know. It hurts when you think about it, doesn't it?
It does, yeah, almost 50, it's like 48 or something like that, but almost we could say 50. But, and so one one of the things then growing up though in Oregon, especially back in the 70s, nobody knew, how do you get into film music or whatever. And about the best thing that we could think of was that go to college down in Southern California. So I went to school down there and really was not a very good student, but because all I wanted to do was write.
Sure.
But it was the same deal. I just kept writing tons of jazz band charts, started writing commercial projects, little industrial films and things like that. Um, it's interesting looking back that a number of people that I was in college with ended up being studio session musicians in LA. And so I've had the joy over the years of being able to hire them to be, in my orchestra. And so it's been a really kind of a cool, part of life that has continued on in a way that has been fun. But anyway, those guys though, um, a lot of times would recommend me then when I got into my early 20s, for writing gigs for like if they were um, in situations of where somebody said, "Oh, I need some charts or whatever, or I need some music arranged," these friends would refer me to the leaders of bands or, I started working for Knott's Berry Farm, which is a theme park down in Southern California. So they hooked me up. I was referred from a couple of my friends to the guy who was in charge of all the music for there, and I also was. Referred to the guy who was in charge of the Ice Capades, which was then sort of Disney on Ice would be kind of a modern incarnation of
Oh,
that.
I remember Ice Capades.
So yeah, so there was about 4 years where I wrote tons of arrangements for the Ice Capades in my early and mid-20s, and, another Disney tie-in is, I, played out at the park at, Disneyland, when I was, like, in my early 20s for a couple years. I was never, like, a full-timer, but I would, like, in seasonal things, like at holidays, or in the summers, they would have more bands and stuff, so I would go and play in different, like on parades, or different things out in front of It's a Small World, in that little plaza there, things like that. So that was kind of my first connection to Disney actually was playing in the park as a bass player,
I was going to ask, was that your main instrument kind of
yeah.
through school? Yeah.
It was. Even though but, like, honestly, playing was always secondary to me. I was always way more interested in writing.
Yeah.
But bass playing, when you're, a kid, trying to make a path in music, you kinda do what you need to do to stay afloat financially. So for me, like, I did a lot of gigs, as a player too, just to, kinda pay the bills and put food on the table and that kinda stuff. And so, I played in a rock band for 2 years actually too, which is a little odd looking back now. I had the '80s kinda haircut thing and black leather pants and, like, all it's
Are
sort
we
of
talking
weird.
flock of seagulls hair, or are we talking more like hair metal hair?
It was neither, actually, it wasn't quite as extreme well, it was never like a metal I wasn't in metal bands, but, Flock of Seagulls would have been maybe what would have been closer to, but it's just so funny looking back, but again, it was great, honestly, looking back at that, Jonathan, it gave me kind of more of I'd had a lot of jazz and classical experience up to that point, but then playing for a couple years in a pop rock band, gave me a lot of, exposure to, that genre of music too that then paid off down the road when it came time to, work on a lot of the Disney songs that you mentioned earlier. I kinda knew how to arrange for, for pop bands and rhythm sections and stuff that I might not have had that exposure otherwise, and so, yeah.
And, you mentioned just kinda taking a step back, you started writing, when you were 12 years old. Is
Yeah,
that right?
yeah.
So you said you started being able to write arrangements and everything. Was just something that's unlocked? I mean, it's not a natural thing for someone to do. How did you pick apart what you heard? Was it something that just came naturally? Is it one of those things that was just in your genes?
I think so. It just was a natural gift, I guess, that, again, my parents had no experience. Again,
Yeah.
I think I mentioned my mom, though, had music playing all the time. I might not have mentioned that, but she, even
Did.
though they weren't musicians, she always would have records going, and it would run the gamut from like Andy Williams, to but all the way up to like West Side Story, the soundtrack of West Side Story. So I kind of absorbed a lot of that music, I think, because I was always listening to it and I didn't recognize it at the time, but I was like a fourth grader and like kind of really always interested in the color, the sounds that the instruments were making, and I didn't quite know how to manifest that self, at that point. But I believe I was kind of the foundation was sort of being laid. And really, actually, in sixth grade, the other thing I did a lot, I think that was indicative was of the path I was maybe going to take was so Jesus Christ Superstar, the cast album.
Angela
Well,
Whitmer,
it
sure.
wasn't the cast album; it was like the concept album, right? I listened to that every night for a year. Um, it was an album because that's how old I am, right? But all four sides of that concept album every night for a year before I'd go to bed, and so I really kind of just absorbed that, I think, too. And again, listening to what made the sounds. I was almost more interested in the orchestra, even though I had no idea what that meant, than I was the lyric or the singing parts. And so it's kind of wild, that. Then when I got to 12 years old and stuff, again, I didn't have keyboard skills and I
Yeah.
didn't have guitar skills and I wasn't playing bass yet. So I was just able to figure it out somehow going straight from my head onto paper with paper and pencil. And, part of that I credit to my, teacher, the choir teacher, who we did sight singing every day for 20 minutes at the beginning of class. So I could somehow then connect. I think that really helped connect the, the pitches and, singing them and seeing them where they were on the staff, and
I was gonna ask you, so you don't have perfect pitch, you more
no,
relative pitch? Yeah.
it's relative, though. It's perfect pitch in a relative sense, if
Yeah,
that
yeah.
makes sense. So I couldn't, like, tell you, I could get you in the ballpark of, "Oh, this is an A," but I couldn't get you exactly there. But once I know a starting pitch, I know it all. It's like a map in my mind, it's all connected, and that's always been something even going way back to 12 years old that I have.
Definitely a gift. If you can at that young be able to piece apart all the various instruments, see it, rearrange it, and figure out how to put it on paper, that at such a young age without training, yeah, that's something
Yeah.
that's in your body and your soul.
Kind of wild, yeah, looking
Yeah.
back and thinking about it now, and again, in 8th grade, I was transcribing Buddy Rich Big Band charts, and this is before computers, so I would listen on a record and then lift up the tone arm, and write down what I was hearing, y and I'm sorry, I'm probably getting way deep in the
No, this
weeds,
is
but
great. This is fascinating to me. Yeah.
the other thing that was really helpful was, orchestrationally, was that music theory class I took in ninth
Yeah.
grade, I mean, which was the whole first year of music theory, but I was very lucky at Oregon State. The professor of the class, recognized again, I think, that there was something there, so he gave me a listening list of 25 of the kind of great pieces of classical music from Beethoven through, at that point, Stockhausen, was
Mhm.
like kind of maybe the farthest along thing. Actually, there was Ligeti too, like and so he taught me how to check out the scores and check out the record at the music library at Oregon State. And I would go into a listening room, and for hours I would just listen to the records of these pieces and go through the score, follow along on the score. And whenever there was something that caught my attention or that caught my, ear color-wise, I would lift off the tone arm and I would study the score and I would try to figure out I would learn what was it that made that color,
Mhm.
Stravinsky. I was listening to Rite of Spring and
Spring.
analyzing that, and the Firebird. And so like the way that he would do his woodwind runs, was something that then in ninth grade, I was analyzing that. And I wasn't just being taught it. I think it was part of the thing that kind of helped is that I had to figure it out, right?
Yeah.
I was given
Sure.
the tools to learn and what the pieces were to listen to, but I was the one that actually had to kind of figure out what it was that made those sounds. And so I was just so fortunate, Jonathan, all along, everything fell for me, all the pieces of the puzzle. And so many people don't get those opportunities. I know I was very fortunate and very lucky that all the the path was laid out for me, other than the path of how to get jobs as a film composer. That's a whole nother
Well,
story.
I was about to ask. So you're right. It sounds like all the stars aligned. You had the
Yeah.
gift, you had the mentorship and
Yeah.
encouragement, which is great, and that kind of created, the fire in the belly, which is awesome. So yeah, I kind of cut you off because I was just fascinated about the internal mechanisms by which you're able to do it. So you were in a rock band. You started doing some songs composing for Knott's Berry Farm. How'd you graduate from that to some of the more full blown film scoring, composing, arranging, etc.?
Yeah. Well, I just kinda kept going. So in my 20s, I was doing everything I could to stay afloat. I was married already at that point. My wife and I were high school sweethearts, so, we, got married right after she finished college. I was on the 7-year plan, but, but so she finished, college, and so at 20 she was 21, I was 22, we got married. So at that point, she's a doctor. She's been retired for about 10
Oh,
years now,
wow.
but so she was in med school, and I had to figure out how to, make enough money to where I couldn't pay for the tuition at that point, but I could at least pay for our rent, and our food and the stuff like that, So I was copying music for other composers. I wrote a ton of jazz band charts. I had my own little publishing company for jazz band charts that
Huh.
I'd sell to high schools and colleges around the country. And I was playing gigs, as a bass player. And then, but along the way, though, I was then connected to Knott's Berry Farm, Ice Capades, and so I just really did anything and everything I could through my 20s just to make enough money to stay afloat. And then, but it got to we were like 30. We were 30 years old, and I hadn't made any progress at all towards my dream of being a film composer. And then Laura's training was finishing up, and I was 30 years old, and this is not I'm not kidding here. I literally had the entire year of being age 30, I did not have a job. I had no work for the entire year, and this is kind of that whole thing of being a musician, right? That you can't kinda control the flow of work. So, Laura got to the end of her training, and we also then our first son was born, and she, said, "Well, I'm gonna go back to Oregon, and, I'm taking our son with me, and you can come if you want." And she'll deny that she said that, but she really did say that.
Yeah.
And so, but honestly, Johnson, I hadn't worked for a year, and so I thought, "Well, okay," I gave it a shot. Oops, sorry. I gave it a shot, and, it didn't work out, and I'm gonna go back to Oregon, and I'll sell insurance, or I'll be a realtor or something like that. And, but then sort of the way my life has gone, so fortunate that it was about 2 weeks before we moved, I got a call from a friend of mine who I'd played in his band, in my 20s, and he had been hired to be the, music supervisor for The Tonight Show right when Jay Leno had taken over.
Oh, yeah,
And
sure.
so it was like, the Carson band with a whole different instrumentation than what the band was with Branford Marsalis was the
Mhm.
band leader at that point. And so they needed a whole new book, whole new set of charts. So my friend asked, well, would I be interested in writing some charts for the Tonight Show? And he didn't know that I was moving to Oregon, because I hadn't told anybody really that I was kind of bailing. And so I wrote about 5 charts for in, that first couple of days, and, took them into NBC, and Branford really liked what I had done. So at that point, I figured, well, I better tell him, I'm going to Oregon because this is 1992, and so Branford said, "Oh, well, they got fax machines up in Oregon, don't they?" Because this is before the internet, you
Sure.
know? So at that point then, we moved to Oregon, and the first 5 years we lived in Oregon, I wrote about 250 charts for The Tonight Show just from, my home in Oregon, and I would print them up. This is like ancient, Finale and ancient Macintosh computers, and
I remember Finale. That was, like, such high tech at the time. It was the
oh my
highest of
gosh,
high
yeah.
tech.
It was, and it would crash all the time too. But so I wrote all these charts then and printed out the score and the parts and would fax them down to NBC, and they would, at the beginning, I would have usually a couple of days to do, a chart, or a score. As the years went by, it got to the point of where, at my last year, I was getting called at, like, noon, to do a chart for that day, and they rehearsed at 3:30, and taped at 5:30, and so I would have just a couple hours to do this thing,
Huh.
a piece of music, and it got to the point where there was no time to get it done by the time of rehearsal, so they would sight read the music at the air on the air,
Huh. Huh.
which so the good news is that it just made me that much more bulletproof in my skill set of I couldn't make any mistakes, so and also I learned really well how to deal with the pressure of
Yeah.
having which is inherent in writing music for films and such. So anyway, so I did that for 5 years. My, buddy, ended up Branford left, my buddy ended up moving on, and the people that came in, I didn't have a connection with, so then I was back to, "Okay, well, I'm in Oregon, what am I gonna do now?" And again, the way my life has been, I think it was, like, a month after that stopped, I got called, from a really great friend of mine, Don Harper, who's a really great composer, and he had been, hired to orchestrate, a movie, and the movie was Speed 2, not
With
Speed.
the one with Jason Patrick.
There you go, look at you.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm impressed. So not the good one, but the one that was a little bit not as good,
Yeah, yeah.
and, but the cool thing about it was
That was
that
Speed on a Boat.
Speed on a boat, which
Yeah.
doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? But anyway, I shouldn't diss it too much because it actually was a pivotal thing in my life. But that was really kind of cool because that was my first film, opportunity that I'd had, and I dreamed my own entire life. And here I was 37 years old, and finally had the opportunity to work on a film. So I orchestrated about 25% of Speed 2, and the smart thing was I went down to LA for the recording sessions, and that was kinda cool because that was the first time I'd been on a big giant soundstage. All the recording work I'd done to that point had been in smaller studios, but, it was like a 90-piece orchestra, and we were recording at I think it was Todd AO, which is sadly no longer there, um but, um but the big pivotal thing was I, then hung out with the composer who was Mark Mancina.
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
Yep,
he's
yep.
great. Yeah, yeah.
So that was my first connection with Mark, and Mark really loved what I had done on the movie. So the movie came and went, and I thought again, "Okay, what am I gonna do now?" And probably 2 or 3 weeks after we were done with working on Speed 2, Mark called me up and said, "Hey, Disney has hired me to produce the music for the Broadway version of The Lion King, and the orchestrator who I had lined up to do it has just quit. Would you be
Mm.
interested in doing in orchestrating The Lion King?" And I'm kinda going and he's also said, "It'll probably be like a month, and you'll be, in New York for like 2 weeks,
Yeah.
and then you'll be home," and stuff. And at this point, we had 2 young kids. My wife was working full time as a doctor, right? And so I'm sort of going, well, so I talked to Laura and she said, "Oh, you probably should do it," and so I go and the month turned into like 8 months that I was gone, pretty much. And so, but the amazing thing about it was this not only solidifying the connection with Mark, but also then getting this opportunity to do The Lion King, which is still running sold out now 30 almost 30 years later, has had, 50 companies around the world or something over these years. You mentioned I was nominated for the Tony Award for orchestrations
Yeah.
and, gave me then kind of that much more kind of reputation, I suppose, so it was just this, kind of, again, a miraculous, circumstances that this opportunity fell into my lap, so sorry, tell me if I'm talking too
No,
long.
no, 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 no. This is so great because I want to know about the evolution, right? Because it's
No.
it's fascinating how just pieces fall into place. And I've spoken to other composers, and it really is like it's always either a connection or some kind of apprenticeship, or there's some kind of break that sets everything off. So it's
Yeah.
like when you have that, either the Tonight Show or that chance meeting with Mark Mancina that kind of
Yeah.
launches it. This is the kind of stuff that's great. And by the way, I want to keep going and learn about it. I've been fortunate. I think I told you earlier. I'm from New York, so
Right.
I was fortunate to grow up with a family that loved musical theater. So I've been to a lot of Broadway shows,
Oh,
and
so great.
so help me, Lion King is the best show I've ever seen in my entire life.
Oh, oh
I'm
my
not just
gosh.
saying that. It is the truth. Okay. I'll tell you a funny story if you have a quick second. So, my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, we were in DC, we went to New York. I somehow got Lion King tickets. I think it was, Lord knows, on a law student's, no
Sure.
money, but I
Yep.
scraped and saved and got Lion King tickets. And I'll never forget, we had the worst seats in the house, like all the way at the top of the theater. Um, and we're sitting next to this one woman, and she's shaking. She's like, "Oh my God,
Mm.
I'm so excited. I can't believe it. This is gonna, I've been looking forward to this my whole life, blah, blah, blah." Like, awesome. She's like, "I hope it's as good as I think it is." So the beginning happens, no spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Just an unbelievable, emotional, the pageantry, the technology, the choreography, the designs, the costumes, everything working together into one of the most spectacular things I've ever seen in my entire life. And so I'm not gonna lie to you, I get choked up. This woman next to us is full out, just bawling,
Oh,
crying. She's like, "It is everything I hoped." So just know that you were
oh.
part of that. It was an amazing experience, and to this day, still one of the greatest things I've ever seen.
Oh, that's so kind of you, Jonathan. Thank you so much for saying that. That means a ton to me, and
Yeah,
I'll just sort of pile on that story that I still am involved in the show. I'll go around. Well, first of all, they have reunions now. We're at the point we have every 5 years. There's a reunion in New York, and so we had the 25th a couple years ago, and now it's run 25 years in London. So when I was in
sure.
London recording Mufasa, the score there, the 25th happened to just fall on the same on a day that I was there for that, and I always go to London too. It's so nice. They bring us the original creatives to all of those markers, and so I still do go around and see the different companies too, just for quality control or whatever, because things change over. There's still, I think, like 8 companies or 9 companies worldwide or something now, so anyway, where I was heading is, I still cry at the beginning,
Oh my God.
at the procession, and now I think of my dad, who's been he passed away 15 years ago or
Mm,
something, but he was so proud of, and my mom was too. They were so supportive as parents, but he was so proud. He would see the Lion King wherever he would travel, around the world, and so I think of my dad, and now as a father, my kids are in their 30s, and so they grew up with the show, right? Because I was working on it, and but I think of them, and now I have a grandson, and
ah,
I think of my grandson, and so I'm just a ball of mess, on the opening number, but it's a very, emotional and beautiful show, and I'm, again, so thankful and fortunate to have landed that because, what a who's ever would have seen that coming, a guy living in Oregon, having the chance to orchestrate that show, and,
yeah.
yeah.
So you the partnership with kind of Mark is formed at that point. You
Yeah,
do Lion King, and then it just continues on from there into
that's right.
more and more and more.
That's right, and just a quick, point too about Lion King, that was my first real connection with Disney, since we're
Sure.
really talking about Disney,
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah,
and,
no, that's true.
that was
Now the Disney stuff is coming on. Yeah,
that's right, yep,
yeah,
yep, and so that was my first real connection, with Disney, and it was the theatrical division, but still, they're very obviously a very big part of the Disney, experience or whatever, but, so then, yeah, so Mark and I hit it off, and so we were just in the deep trenches. Lion King was a real any theater show, putting it together is a really, really intense process, and so we just completely bonded at that point, and really from, Lion King, I mean, yeah, from there all the way up through Moana, then I everything that Mark worked on, I worked on, and I did every note of orchestration and, all the arrangements and a good chunk of additional music composition as well on all those, films too that we did together. And so the next one up was Tarzan, and, that was, working with Phil Collins,
yeah,
and so, having that chance of, Phil, of a very iconic, performer and, writer, songwriter and all that stuff. So yeah, we, and at that point, that was my first then really big film. Well, it was not just my first big film, it was my first film, period, that I did every note, of where, I wasn't sure I was gonna be able to do that because 'cause I'd never done it before.
yeah.
Would I be able to do that? Because most films or most people don't, they have teams of orchestrators or they have teams of, assistant composers or whatever it's going to be. But to have done every note of a film was a lot to bite off. But I made it through. And I knew at that point I could kind of do it moving forward. Yeah. That,
And maybe this is a good time to ask Dave, because you're a composer, arranger, orchestrator. If you don't mind, maybe just kind of explain, the three different functions and how they fit within the context of the movie.
Yeah, I'll do my best.
Okay.
And and there's also I'll preface it by saying that there are even for the same title of role, there are different kind of sub ways of doing things within it. So the way I look at it is the composer is the person who comes up with the themes, the melodies, the chord changes at its most basic level. That's what the composer does. Then depending on what the composer's skill set is or strengths or weaknesses or time constraints to come into play in films. The composer will at this point, you always have to do mock-ups of everything. So you have to, which means like sampled sounds of what the cue is going to sound like. You can't just like in the old days, you could write a melody and go in and pitch it to the director of the film, on a piano and play it along and stuff like that. And those days are long gone now. So you have to have a complete mock-up of everything. So some composers, including me, will mock up everything within as it's going to be in when it's recorded in replaced by real musicians. And so a composer can be either just the melody and the chord changes person, or then it can be somebody as deep as doing the entire John Williams would have been the old school approach of where he did a very detailed sketch on
Hmm.
I think he used seven staves, I think it is, or whatever, eight staves. So where he wrote exactly what the woodwinds are going to be doing and what all the strings are going to be doing and what the brass are going to do and the percussion and the harps. And so the orchestra, well, I'm getting ahead of myself, but so
Okay.
John Williams was right. There was no question of what John Williams would be want. You essentially are just transcribing what he's doing to a full score.
Totally.
In today's world, that now is John Williams' approach would be replaced in a sequencer,
Mm.
like Cubase or Logic, or that the composer is going to write in that. And some composers will write the complete mock-up. Again, that's what I do because I've orchestrated for so long. I know exactly what I want the orchestra to be doing. Other composers will write a sketch, maybe just a piano part inside of a sequencer that will be chasing the action or whatever on picture. But and there'll be levels in between that,
Yeah.
in composer. So then the next kind of iteration would be, you could be in the film score world, there'd be like it would be called more of a you know, um, composer's assistant or assistant composer or ghostwriter would be another way
Mm.
to kind of put it, where there'll be a person that will take those ideas of the melody and the chord changes, and then we'll flesh them out for an orchestra. I guess it would be synth orchestrator would be another term that sometimes is used, right? And so that'll be sort of like a person that would be taking the genesis of the material and fleshing it out and making the mock-up. If you're talking about then song arranging,
Yes.
which I've done a fair amount of.
With some of the biggest songs ever. So yeah,
Well,
pretty
I've
big.
been very lucky again. But so what a song arranger will do, sort of would be the analogous of that, of the film score, like assistant composer. A song arranger will be like for instance, in the on the songs that I work on, I get from the composer or the songwriter, I'll get like the melody that will have the lyrics and a piano part usually that has the chord changes,
Yeah.
but because most of the songwriters on Disney films especially are really kind of come from the Broadway world. So
Sure.
they're going to do like it's really a piano vocal is what it's called. And then I'll take that and I will do all the counter melodies like in for the first time forever, for instance, there's French horn counterlines that go along. So you have for the first time and forever, and then there's a French horn answer to that or whatever.
Yep.
So my contribution would be those answers, and then I also then write all of the string parts,
Sure.
and do all of the brass things and all the percussion. So I take essentially just a piano part and blow that up into a full orchestra.
Like, Let It Go is a perfect example, right?
Exactly.
It totally fleshed it out, and Let It Go would not be the song it nearly would be without that orchestration in the middle and the
Right.
tension and the way it resolves. It just really makes the song so incredible.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think if you or your listeners are interested, one sort of way to look at what a song arranger does, if you go to the deluxe version of Frozen, there are the demos, the piano demos
Yes.
that Bobby and Kristen did, and that's what I got. I got Kristen singing, "Let It Go," and Bobby's playing piano, and that's that. So you listen to their on the deluxe version, you'll see what they gave to me, and then you'll also then hear what I did with that and all the songs, in all the films that I've done. You can get that kind of a sense, and you'll hear the final version, and that's what I contributed. So
Of course, sorry, go on, keep going,
oh,
please.
I was gonna say, so that's like the arranging level
Yep.
of what people do. So then the next tier down is orchestration. It's not really tier down, but the next step in the process is the orchestrator and orchestration. And so that can range from a composer like me will give a completely fleshed out mock-up. So my orchestrator, I would love to orchestrate everything that I do, but now that I've had the composing opportunities, there just flat out isn't time to do it because you don't have enough time to do everything. So I have a wonderful orchestrator who works perfectly for me. His name is Dave Julie, and so Dave takes my Cubase file, which is all the MIDI information and the sample mockup, and then he converts that into a printed score that then the parts for the individual instruments are extracted from that score, and then that's what are passed out for the recording session for the musicians. And so, one of the beautiful things I love about Dave is first of all, he took a month to study my orchestration. He works for Disney in the music prep department of Disney. So he took all of my scores and went back and learned kind of my tendencies. So when
Ah,
he started orchestrating for me, he knew this is how Metzger would do it. And so he first off is trying to do it as honor kind of how I would do, my articulations, putting in my staccatos or my string phrasing, things like that. And so, and then also the nice thing is he allows me to go through all of the scores after he's done them, and I can kind of make little adjustments or whatever before it goes to the copying process of preparing the parts for the recording sessions. So that's one level of orchestration. Some composers, you will get instructions, they don't want anything changed at all.
mm,
Then you will get other composers who will just sort of when they're doing the mock-ups, they're doing it so fast, they don't really worry about voicing the brass properly,
mhm.
or they will maybe write string parts that are, unplayable by one set of string sections that would take 3 orchestras to record because 'cause they're just sort of throwing stuff on. So, an orchestrator's job in those kind of relationships is to almost, like, clean up the mock-ups and make it to where it's playable by a real orchestra, because it just wouldn't there's too much going on, to
Sure.
really so that's when, an experienced orchestrator is really helpful because they know kinda how to cull things down and still keep the size and the scope of the cue, but make it playable by real orchestras. And so then the next kind of tier of orchestrators down would be where they're given kind of just still rough things. There's not, um, there's again very sketchy kind of ideas, and the orchestrator's job is to fill in a lot of the holes. And that's sort of a lot of cases where there's not like that step of a additional composer, assistant composer, kind of thing. And so that's where the composer again has just had just laid in a piano part and maybe a very rough sketch of what strings might do, and then at that point, then an orchestrator's job is to really do the flat out orchestration. So, I'm sorry, that's a very detailed
No, it's
description.
no, no. I appreciate it, and it makes sense because you hear all these different terms, and I think on some level people understand, but really understanding the nuts and bolts is kind of what I was hoping to get because you've done it all
Yeah,
with songs that people know and appreciate. So I think it'd be perfect coming from you to figure it out.
yeah.
With that, talk a little about the song arrangement. So you've worked with Lin-Manuel Miranda and Bobby Lopez and Chris Anderson Lopez and Elton John and all these huge art and Alan Menken. So they have, like I said, they kind of lay out the sketches on the piano and the vocals, and you kind of take it to the next level.
Mhm.
How collaborative is the process? Did you take in directions they didn't anticipate, or do they kind of see
Oh,
it and you help make it happen, or is it a combination of both?
it's really interesting because sometimes I usually try to really talk with the folk, with the songwriters before I start, just so I kind of know what direction they're kind of expecting. And but though then what we'll do is we'll have a talk through session, and then I will just go and do my thing. And the first thing that I do is I'll listen to the lyric. I'll listen to their demo, their piano vocal demo, and I will read through the lyric multiple times to really kind of understand, because that's really the whole point. When you're working on a film or a Broadway show, the songs are a part of the story arc, right? And when I was young, meaning in my 20s, I really didn't understand this, that I would think I was just all focused on the music and not really caring about the lyric, right? And then as I got older, I realized, holy cow, no, it's all about the lyric because that's the most important thing. And so as an arranger, your job is to really help amplify what the story, the lyric is trying to tell. And so I listen many times through and try to really understand what the song is about. Then I dive in and do my mock-up in my computer in sequencer, and then eventually, when I feel comfortable with it, I will send a stereo file to the songwriter, and they will listen to it and they'll give notes, and then I'll address those, and there's usually a back and forth of a couple of times. Sometimes I get lucky and it's a home run right off the bat. Sometimes it can be a little bit of a struggle where I
Yeah.
maybe aren't exactly what they're looking for, and so there's a couple of cycles through. Once in a while you have to go back to the drawing board, and but that's all cool because that's the whole. The point is you want to really, I'm supporting the songwriter. It's not about what I want to do; it's what their vision is, and hopefully I can add some things that they wouldn't have expected, and bring some unexpected joy to their life and something that they, are surprised about. But at the end of the day, it is supporting not only their vision, but frankly, it's supporting the film or the if it's a theater thing, the piece. That's what it's all about for all of us. We're all there trying to make this, what it is. Um,
Go ahead.
I had one quick little thing about
Please.
like because
I
you
was going
would.
to ask you. Go. No, please
Yeah,
go.
yeah. You had said, like, was there anything that was a real surprise for the songwriter?
That was going to exactly follow up with that.
Right, and the one that I always really do tell is for the first time in forever. So I didn't know Bobby and Kristen before working on Frozen. I got brought in, relatively late in the game. They'd gone through a couple of other people, to as arrangers who weren't quite, what the studio or whoever it was were looking for. So eventually it came to me. Tom McDougall, who's now the president
Ah,
of all music for Disney,
sure.
at that point was the head, along with Chris Montana. They were kind of like heads of the feature animation. It's actually not feature animation; it's just the animation division. And so Tom was the one who thought of bringing me in because I'd known Tom for. Going back to Tarzan. So Tom brought me in because he thought I might be a good fit for Bobby and Kristen. But I was also working on the film Planes at the same
Oh,
time,
sure. Of course.
and
Yeah.
I did a lot of I composed probably 40% of that film, as well as orchestrating every note, and stuff like that. So I was deeply involved in that film, and so I got Tom asked, "Well, would you be interested in working on this?" And nobody knew what Frozen was going to be, too, right at that point. So, but for
Totally.
me, I love Tom and Bob and Kristen in particular are like my North Stars. They are like they are I love everybody I work with, but Tom and Bobby and Kristen are like this whole nother level. They're on the pedestal people for me because they, up to that point, up to Frozen, I had been a pretty completely hidden person working for the most part. I guess I had a little exposure on The Lion King, but other than that, all my film work, I was really kind of a buried, orchestrated guy in the credits. I didn't, people didn't really know what I was really kind of doing, behind the scenes. So Frozen was the first time I had been brought into this level of where I was the person in direct connection with the songwriters. I
Mhm.
wasn't doing the work between, so there wasn't somebody in between me sort of getting credited for doing work that I'd been sort of doing. So Tom saw that I had he trusted in me that I had the ability to do this and put me in the position to do it with Bob and Kristen. Bob and Kristen were willing to work with me. And, um, and so the first song I did on Frozen was, Love is an Open Door, and which is, kind of a straight ahead song, right? And it was pretty obvious with their mock-up or with their piano vocal demo what it should be. So I did it in the middle of, crunching on planes and they loved it. And so then it was like, okay, well, let's do another song. Let's have David do another song. And so the second one was For the First Time in Forever. And because of the amount of time that I had with planes was really intense at that point, so I had a day and a half to do my whole mock-up on For the First Time in Forever, and because of that, I didn't and normally you would love to have a week or 2 to do it, but I just had, like, a very short amount of time, and I didn't have time to talk with them about what they were looking for in that song.
Mm.
And so I started on a Sunday morning, and I had to be done by Monday afternoon, and, because of my schedule. So, the first thing I did was I listened to their demo, and I was going, "Well, I can see the song going 2 ways. It can either be a, classic Disney kind of orchestral thing, or it could be like a rhythm section thing." And I
Mm.
didn't really know Bobby and Kristen at all, except for I knew that Love is an Open Door was a rhythm section thing, and I knew Bobby's stuff with Avenue Q
Uh-huh.
and with,
Book of Mormon.
Book of Mormon, was, like, very much rhythm section stuff. So I, like, rolled the dice, though, and I thought, "Man, this is my chance. I'm gonna do, like, a classic Disney orchestration approach to it." And I did it, and I sent it off to Bobby and Kristen after a day and a half of working on it, like, not knowing what the heck was gonna happen. And they called me back and said they just had goosebumps. They just absolutely loved what I did with it, and it was, like, more than they could have ever dreamed, and so that sort of solidified our relationship then. And then I come to find out, like, about 3 years later, we were having a drink somewhere, and they told me that they had actually written that envisioning it as a Billy Joel kinda song.
Oh, how interesting.
Yeah, right? And, you could totally see it. It would have been a great Billy Joel kinda song,
And actually, now that you mention it, I'm just kinda thinking about
right?
it in my head. It really can be.
It would have been, and so but that one of the things that they just loved was I completely turned what they were expecting on their on its head, and they heard then the classic Disney that it was going to go in a way that they were not even thinking the film could go, and then it kind of went, farther that way as we got into more of the songs and stuff, and so anyway, I always kinda love telling that story because it's just like, you set me up perfect you teed me up, with the that was the perfect example of where I sent back something that the songwriters weren't expecting, and it worked out,
I love that, and I do have to just also just maybe fanboy out a bit. Like, one song, it's not underrated, but in the Frozen context, it's one that maybe doesn't get as much press. Show Yourself. Um, I think that song is just genius, but B, a large part of it is because the harmony and the orchestration and all the emotion that's built into it. Is that something that you knew was going to really hit those emotional chords? Because it really is a very, very, very powerful song.
Yeah, well, that's really kind of you, Jonathan, to
Yeah.
say that too. And I think I can say this that song took it was in development for quite a while.
Mhm.
It took a long time for not only sonic song wise, but also just scene wise. Like that scene took a long
Yeah.
time to really land to where it ended up at. And there were a lot of iterations, a lot of back and forth. I did a number of I'm usually Well, it can kinda go both ways. I'm either usually brought in at the beginning of a song, like, if it's a live action like Spirited, with Pascal and Paul, I was brought in at the beginning because they had to film since it was live action, they had to film the actors singing to the song, so I had to do my arrangements at the beginning before filming. But in animation, a lot of times, I'm not brought in until the songs are pretty well locked into the scene, and so it'll live as a piano and a vocal
Mm,
demo in when they're doing all the storyboards and they get into the animations, and so but, Show Yourself was a little bit different because there was so much going on, and it was such a deep scene that, they brought me in a little earlier than I'm, sometimes am brought in. So I had to kinda go back too, we all had to go back several, throughout that development, um until it landed kinda where it was, but I think the payoff was so wonderful and so much worth
huh,
it because I agree with you, I think it's a beautiful song it's a great song, and again, I love Bobby and Kristen, so much,
yeah.
but they totally nailed it, and, um, and that was a chance for me to sort of flex my muscles orchestrationally and arranging-wise and stuff, and, I don't know if I'm sure you have seen, like, there's that Making of Frozen 2, yeah, and so they actually sent up a film crew to Oregon to my studio to film me, kind of doing my mock-up thing, and so, again, if you or any of your listeners are interested, they can kinda go and see that, and it goes through the recording, session with the orchestra as well, but it was a lot of work, but man, it was so worth it, I'm with you, that's a great scene and, another hyper emotional classic Disney, right? One of the things I love about Disney is that you have this emotion that just taps into people's core,
Yeah.
and,
But even at the beginning with, kind of the piano lightly in the background with kind of the
right.
counterpoint to it is beautiful. But then that climax when the harmony kicks in with Nina Menzel, and I think it's Evan Rachel Wood, right?
Yeah,
That
yeah.
thing, which never fails to give me goosebumps. I just think it's just pure brilliant.
Oh, well, thank you very much, and again, props to Bobby and Kristen and to all of the folks who worked so hard on that whole scene. It's amazing how much work goes into these things, you know?
Well, I wanna talk about, you've always had the dream of working on your own film score, so I wanna talk about your composing roles as well, but let me just before we jump in, another enormous film you worked on was Moana, and that's a little bit different because it's Disney, but also had that authentic kind of Polynesian elements to it. So talk a little bit about how you were able to work, be authentic, still incorporate the Disney piece, and then, have the whole Lin-Manuel Miranda element involved in it as
Right.
well. It's a lot of different elements going on.
Right, right, I think, uh, one of the cool things about Moana, I think the way that it ended up was that it was with Mark, so it was
Yep.
Mark Menchie and I, and we did our best. It was a really nice thing too that it's not always the case, but to have the score composer and team also do the songs, right? Because to me, that just creates this continuity that sometimes you will miss if you have a different team doing the song arrangements and a different person or team doing the score. My own personal opinion, other people are going to feel differently, and that's great. I don't have a problem. To me, I just love that continuity that goes. But so Mark and I worked really, really hard to um, incorporate um, the um, and respect and honor, the South Pacific sound, and then, bring that into the songs. So one of the cool things is we used elements from the score, percussion elements in the song, so it was the same stuff. So again, that really helps to bring it all together, for one thing. But, one of the things too, the other person I haven't brought up is Opataya,
Oh, yeah.
and Tevaka, his band Tevaka, who played we had play percussion. So, they have these log drums that are amazing, sounding and honestly, obviously too, they're the authentic real deal, to play it. So they were playing, contributed a lot to the percussion elements in the score. And so um, it was honestly, I look back and it was so hard. It was maybe the hardest project I've worked on. Lion King Broadway was really hard too.
Yeah.
Um, there've been other ones, but Moana was just really and not hard in a bad way, just hard. And we tried so hard. Mark and I tried so hard to just like really land that thing in a really respectful way that musically had heart and had soul, but also had all that percussion element. So not only did we use Tevaka for the percussion, but we also had massive sessions with LA session players
Wow.
doing, and we had, if you go on my website, I think there are like pictures there of like some of the percussion sessions where there are these big, ginormous drums and drum setups, and we used shoot, what's the coconut scene? What are
Oh,
those guys?
not Kamakura.
Um, Kakamora.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I found the biggest bass drum in Los Angeles that was still functioning. And so it's this ginormous bass drum for like when they're beating the drum on the to get the rowing thing going, the coconuts rowing. And so I found, they found this ginormous drum, and there's a picture of me standing in front of that bass drum, and that thing that they would hit the bass drum, and you would feel it like from 40 feet away. You would feel the reverberation of it, or the waveform. But anyway, so it was kind of like the perfect storm, I kind of think, of where we had the orchestral elements, which is kind of my home run sweet spot, and you have the guitar and the percussion approach that Mark brought to it, and along with Opataya, and you had the brilliant songs from Lynn, and we were working on that one, Hamilton. He was still working on Hamilton when we were
Wow.
doing, but we were able to like spin this all together into this, thing that worked. And another thing we did was uh, when we were scoring the film, Mark and I, there are all the fireballs coming through, and the big fight at the end.
Yeah.
And so we had a choir that recorded in Fiji. There was a Fijian choir. And so I did all that arranging, for the choral parts too, as well as having another choir in LA. It was like massive. But so what we did is Mark and I watched the scenes, and we thought of like little snippets of words like flaming ball of fire, or like splashes into the water. And there were like, we came up with about 10 different English terms that were evocative of what was going on screen. We sent that list to Opataya, to Opie, and Opie translated them into the lexicon shoot, and I can't think of the language now. Ugh. Well, anyway, of
Yeah.
the language of the land.
Maori? Maori? Is it
I think
Maori?
yes, thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah,
It's yeah,
yeah.
and so Optai then sent us back, and we also had Opie do a voice recording of the pronunciation because you could,
So
so
easy to
then
screw up.
I took those words of, and the pronunciation, and I incorporated those into, so the choir that we recorded in Fiji is chanting these words, that, and so it's kind of cool, right? And nobody would know that. I mean, we're talking about it now, you know it, and your
Yeah.
listeners know that, but it's like it's again the depth that we took to really be authentic and to really go above and beyond to try to make Moana a deeper thing than just another score and another sets of songs.
Well, it worked, right? I mean, because A, commercial success, but critical success. Everyone loves it. And I think everyone loves it because it had all those elements. It was a classic Disney story. But I think the authenticity, that's what I think these days really carries the day is people want authenticity. It has to fit what's on the screen.
Yep, I agree completely with you.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep, yeah.
That's terrific, and obviously there's a full circle moment with Lin-Manuel with Mufasa, but talk about, you've been wanting to score your own. You've built an incredible reputation as an orchestrator and an arranger. What's the first film you actually get to score on your own?
Yeah. So oddly enough, I mean, I got to say too, my dream at age 16 was to be a film composer, right?
Mhm. Yep.
And it took a long time to get to the point of being even a orchestrator and then an arranger. And I was doing a lot of composition through all, 25, 30 years, but it was always as an additional music person or under the name of somebody else. So I was never credited as a composer, right? I had those couple of Disney Toon films,
Yep.
that were great in the early 2000s, but so I sort of thought, "Oh, man," I'd hit, late 50s, I was thinking 60. this is a dream that it was a great dream, but it was never gonna happen. I was
Yep.
never but I was happy because 'cause I'd had a decent career and I'd worked on some big projects, and I'd been so fortunate to work on things that were hopefully were meaningful to people to listen to and stuff like that, so I couldn't complain at all. But there's a little part of you that thinks, well, would have been nice to have had a chance to have been a composer of my own, with my own name up there, but it just wasn't gonna happen. But then and I'd given up on it. I'd given up
Mm,
on it, like, in probably about 2018. I just sort of accepted, well, not gonna happen. Wish it woulda, but it didn't.
yeah.
So, I got to the point of where I was 63 years old, and out of the blue, Matt Walker, who has is now the president of music for Disney Animation.
Okay.
So, he was in the role that Tom was in, Tom McDougall, and then who was in the role that Chris Montan had been in. So I'd known this whole lineage, and I'd known Matt for a long time. He
Yep.
was actually the executive for my Disney Toon films for, Tarzan 2 and Brother Bear 2. And so Matt called me up, and I love Matt too. Matt's a great guy and a great friend. So Matt, called me up out of the blue. I was in London recording Spirited, I believe it was. I was recording the orchestra for Spirited, and Matt calls me up, and I answer it, and I'm going and he says, "So, would you be interested in maybe, we're talking about putting your name up to be the composer on this film, Wish. Would you be okay with putting your name up for it?" And I said, "Oh, sure, great," knowing that there's gonna be 10 other composers that are up, and that it's very heartwarming that they would think of, and this was probably Tom too, I don't know that for a fact, but it was probably Tom and Matt thought of putting me up, and so Matt, um I told Matt, "Yes, that's great," thinking, "This is really nice, thank you, Matt. It's not gonna happen. Why would they hire me? 63-year-old guy, had no track record." I had a track record with Disney, but I had no track record of as a known composer,
Yeah.
And, and so then, finish up Spirited, go back to working on that. Nothing I don't hear anything for months. Don't hear anything. And I think, "Well, it was really nice, thanks for thinking of me, love that." That meant a lot to me, actually. Then I reach a point like 4 months after Matt first called, it might even have been 5 months, and I was thinking, "Oh, what do I got to lose? I'll reach back to Matt and say, 'Hey, have you heard anything? I'm sure somebody else has the job,'" so I reach back to I call him up, and he says, "Well, I'm really glad you called because actually we're right at the point of the directors are right at the point of making the decision of who they, are gonna hire for the composer and you're still in the running." And I'm going, "Oh, he's just probably he's probably just being nice," and so I go, "Oh, well, that's really nice," and so then I don't hear anything back for another 6 weeks or something like that. And then out of the blue, Matt calls me up and he said, "Hang on a sec," and he got Tom on the phone too. And
Mhm.
they said, "Well, you know, uh" I can't remember the exact wording, but essentially it was, "Congratulations, you've been hired to be the composer of Wish."
Wow.
And I literally, Jonathan, I'm not kidding, I'm pretty emotional,
Sure.
and I literally just start crying and
Mm,
tears, and I'm out here in my studio. I
yeah.
was sitting right here,
Mhm.
and I cannot believe it. So we hang up, and I go on and I tell my wife, who has been on this journey with me since junior year of high school, and she starts crying, and we're just hugging and just can't believe that finally, we'd had this chance. So, the opportunity had come to me, and, so that's how I found out. Then it was gonna be then they also were interested in me then working on the songs with Julia Michaels and Ben Rice
Ah,
too. So I think that was part of the allure. So one of the directors, of the film was Chris Buck, who I'd worked on way back on Tarzan.
mhm.
And he was the director on Tarzan, and he was also the director on Frozen and Frozen 2. And so I worked with Chris for quite a while. So I think it helped that Chris knew me, didn't know me as a composer, but he knew that I was reliable, you know, and and I think again, they were interested in having me be experienced hand to help with the songs on Wish, and so that helped my case to be the composer. And so then in the interim, then and I think they kind of nobody ever told me this, but I think that it's sort of part of the line of getting to be getting the gig of the composer of a major film is that they ask, well, would I be interested, or could I do Once Upon a Studio as well, which was
Love that so much. Love
oh,
that so much. I cried during
oh,
that too, by the way.
oh, I do too. I
How
did
can you
too.
not? When Mickey sees the picture of Walt,
Oh,
there's no way you can't cry
yeah,
during that. Who are you
yeah.
kidding?
Yep, yep. Oh, yeah. So anyway, and of course, I I didn't know that that was sort of my audition, but I sorta knew, and I really wanted to do it anyway because to me that was like the pinnacle job, getting to do the short that commemorates, the 100th year of the studio, it's like, wow, that's a huge honor, and I feel that way, that so anyway, so before I got into Wish, then I, did, Once Upon a Studio, and that was so cool because again, getting to work with all those themes, but also kind of come up with my own themes and when needed, and then to go and get to write in the style of the music that I love, which is going back, to Snow White, and which by the way, I did. This was the song arranger of Snow White. I don't know if you know that or we talked about that on the live action version that just came
Oh,
out.
I didn't know that with Pasek and Paul also.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Yep.
didn't know that.
Yep.
I did
Yep.
not know that. Oh,
Yep, yep, yep. So anyway, going back to Once Upon a Studio, I was got to write in all these great styles, and in Cinderella, and in all these beautiful things that I grew up as a kid watching, and then have loved it in my all along, so and getting to arrange, then the When You Wish Upon a Star, then the way that that film ends is just like was again, I was crying. And Don Harper, my friend that I, kept hooked me up with Mark Mancina, who
uh-huh.
again is a beautiful person. So Don was my conductor on both, Once Upon a Studio and Wish. And, I asked Don, "Would you mind could I conduct, When You Wish Upon a Star?"
Ah,
And he was so gracious in letting me do that. So I'm a horrible conductor, but to have that opportunity to do it was just so meaningful to me as
oh my
well.
gosh.
And, so that was, Once Upon a Studio, did that. And then when I was finished with that, then I was time for me to jump into Wish. And again, the dream come true of getting to, be, the composer on my own film after all of these years, and it was, just an absolute blast. The studio was so great, and they were so supportive of me, and to give me the opportunity to, it was like, just, yeah, what can I say? You know?
I mean, and also, I mean, that was a big film because I think it also was associated with the 100th, birthday,
Exactly.
right? Because it was, I know, kind of the whole star with and all. I'm
Yep.
not gonna spoil anything, but people seem
Yeah,
very
yeah.
like, there's a lot of wink, wink, nod, nods throughout the whole
Yes.
movie, which is kinda
Yep.
half the fun of the movie is noticing all the little Easter eggs.
Exactly right. Yep. And so musically, I got that opportunity to play some of those cards, here and there, and that was part of the director's desire to, and so yeah, it was really great, and I loved it too because I got to write, the island, Rosas is an island is a fictional island, but it's situated off the coast of Spain in the
Yep.
Mediterranean. So I got to play all these beautiful, Spanish kind of, allusions and things like that, things that I love. I got to, do things that it was honestly, Jonathan, it was really the pent up thing of my entire life, right?
I was gonna ask, yeah,
Yeah.
it's gotta be like, it finally all coalesces to what everything and was it here's the question for you, Dave, was it everything you'd hoped for and then some?
Massively
Yeah,
so.
yeah, yeah.
It was beyond the what I hoped for, and I'm very, very, I try not to be prideful, but I can't kind of not say that I wasn't very proud of the way that, it turned out, and the other cool thing, right, is that we recorded in LA, and so all of my friends that, the studio musicians in LA that I've known for all these decades, and they've known me as an arranger and orchestrator, but then to have, be playing, be the composer and have them playing on the score as well was just the pièce de résistance, of of the experience, and, so yeah, yeah, what a dream, you know?
And I guess just from a timing perspective, you did Once Upon a Studio. How long was it from like, first day on, discussing with the director and everything to, finally getting everything to can? What's that timeline
Yeah,
like?
on Once Upon a Studio?
Yeah. Oh, no, no, no.
Oh,
For Wish.
on
Yeah.
Wish, right, so Wish, I wanna say they lined me up in, it must've been September 2nd or 3rd or whatever, 2023, and, but I did Once Upon a Studio
Yep. Oh, I see.
in
Okay.
there, and I couldn't really start because they were still getting the story arc together and as the score composer, you're really writing to ideally, you're writing to Final Cut, which never happens, but, but you're hopefully not starting on something that is so rough picture-wise that you're gonna have to go back and rewrite the whole thing essentially from scratch, because they've edited it so much. But, I don't it was really May. We finished recording Once Upon a Studio in March or April, and then they didn't feel like and then I was working on the songs for Wish all along from September along, but I didn't really start scoring until it was probably mid-May, I think was
Mm.
when I started scoring, and then I had, to be finished by the end of August. So, was it August, July, June? I had, like, 3 months maybe?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty lickety split.
Oh, yeah, but it
Yeah.
was honestly, yeah, it was a little panicky because, again, going back to, like, Tarzan, where I wasn't sure if I'd be able to orchestrate the whole Tarzan score by myself, right? I was hoping I was gonna be able to write the whole thing on Wish because hadn't really had to do that kind of on a major film yet. That was the one thing, but it it wasn't a problem. And again, it's just that inner doubt that everybody has sometimes when you're facing a mountain to climb. Um, but, uh, um, but yeah, and again, I wrote every note, didn't have any assistants, any arrangers, any ghostwriters, any music assistants. I work here by myself up in Oregon. I don't have a technician even. I do all of my computer programming by myself, all my
Wow.
wiring, all of the stuff. So, again, I did have, Dave Julie, who was helping me, on the orchestrations on Wish, but, also had the support of the beautiful Disney, music preparation team. Booker White has been there for a long time. He's a wonderful guy, wonderful friend, completely support, all of the, all the musicians and the contractors and just everybody I felt like I had they all kinda, I think, wanted to help me succeed, I suppose, and, yeah.
I was gonna ask, like, you've been in and around so many different pieces of the film composition, arranging, and orchestration. Now you're sitting in the seat yourself. Anything surprise you, or did kinda everything fall in
Yeah.
based on your experience, you know what you were doing?
I've done it even though I hadn't been the composer before, I have composed hours and hours and hours of music leading, for film going up to Wish. So, yeah, so I'd been through every single thing, and that's one thing I can really feel like when I talk to a director or whatever, I can say, I don't say this, but I'm thinking, "I've seen everything, I've been through it all. Nothing phases me, nothing will phase me." And I don't want that to sound egotistical at all, but it's
Uh-huh.
just I've been around so long that I really have seen it all. There's nothing that I haven't seen at this point.
Well, so you congrats, you have the big career success, everything probably you could have ended it right there, but you didn't because, an even possibly bigger movie comes along. Tell us the Mufasa story. How did that come to be?
Yeah. Well, Mufasa was, another one that just kinda came out of the sky,
Yeah.
I finished up Wish, and I I think I can truly say this, that everybody was really happy with what I'd done, and
Absolutely.
I'm really buttoned up. So there's no drama with me, you can probably tell that even as it's talking, I'm a pretty laid back guy. There's
100%.
Yeah, there's no surprises. I work as hard as I can to make things a success, and again, with Disney, I have this long track record. So we got to the end of Wish, and I think everybody was very appreciative of me. So it came about, um, I wanna say about February or March of 2025 no, 2024, I got a call from Tom MacDougall,
Mhm.
head of Disney live action music, head of all of music Disney at this point, and he was saying, "Well, what are you kinda doing for the rest of the year?" or for the next few months, I think is what he said probably. And at that point, I really had nothing. You know what I had, Jonathan, on my
Yeah.
plate is my wife and I had planned on because she has been so great that I have had to bail on so many vacations throughout my life, that we had booked a month-long trip to France,
Oh, good for you.
and we had rented these beautiful um, rural in the Luberon in Provence, these beautiful giant um, they call them mosses, I believe, but chateaus or whatever you wanna
Yeah.
say, that, and we were gonna have our kids fly out and join us for as long as they could because 'cause they're working, but, so they were gonna spend 1 to 2 weeks each, with my one son is married, the one with the grandkid, and we were gonna have this beautiful family month, and that was the only thing that was going on in 2024. That was
Yeah.
all I was planning on taking the whole year off, and so Tom calls and asks me, and I said, "Well, the only thing we're really doing is I'm hoping we're going to France, we were planning on going to France for a month." And he said, "Oh," he said, "Well, we've got this thing, this Mufasa, and we're kind of looking the way it's working out, wondering if you might be available to kind of jump in on it." And, and I'm sort of going, "Oh,"
Hmm.
and I'm knowing Mufasa's probably gonna be a big movie. And so it's sort of hard to, like, and I love Tom. Tom could ask me to wash his car,
Yeah.
and I would wash his car because I love Tom, and Tom is just he's that guy, as I've said earlier, so I'm thinking, "Okay, anything I can do to help Tom, if Tommy needs if he's asking for me to come in, there's probably a reason," And so I say, "Yeah." So he says, "Okay, well, I'll get back to you." And in the meantime, I'm telling Laura, my wife, "Well, Tom just called, and" what are we gonna do, if there's something that if this leads to something? And so she's great. She says, "Well, we'll figure it out."
Yeah.
So Tom calls back a couple weeks later and says, "Well, would you be up for doing like a couple of little demos, spec demos of a couple of scenes from the film, just so the director would, kind of know what you would do with it, and Barry Jenkins is the
Yeah.
director.
Great
Barry,
director. Great director.
genius,
Yeah.
Barry is like brilliant and a great guy, but so I do a couple of scenes and send them in, and Barry's on board with me coming onto the film. And also the other thing is the studio heads, David Greenbaum had just come in as the head of live action, and he was on board with me coming in onto the film too. So at that point, then Tom says, "Okay." Then now we're into late March or might even have been early April at this point. I think it was early April, mid-April even maybe, and we're leaving to go to France, like, the end of April.
Oh, good God.
Yeah, and, of course, there's no way I can do Mufasa and go to France, but Tom, being Tom, he says, "Well, what about if" and I told him, "It's like this month, and we've paid for all of these places, and the kids are coming in." And says, "Well, what if we figure out a way where you can go for like a week or 10 days and then and still have a little bit of vacation?" So I say, "That would be so great. Thank you." So Laura's on board. And so I do as many cues as I can do before leaving for France. And then I fly to LA too and have a meeting with Barry, and we talk through the film and what
Mm.
what we're gonna do. So then do as many cues as I can, go to France, have about 10 days with my family, set up a studio in France. I take a remote rig and I set it up in the an extra bedroom in these places I'm working, and then uh, after 10 days, then I leave. The family keeps going on vacation in beautiful Provence, and
Yeah.
I fly to London, and
Oh,
so then I start working. So I'm setting up. There's about 3 weeks before our first recording session, so I go to London and I just keep writing in London. Barry comes over, we do spend some more time together and going through cues and stuff like that. So then, record probably 30 minutes of score, I guess, in London for about 2 weeks. And it's epic
yeah.
because it's, 95-piece orchestra, um, 32, 24 piece, 24, 32 piece, I can't remember, voice, kind of concert or film score choir. Lebo is brought
Yep,
in.
yep,
Lebo has
yep.
done stuff. So we got Lebo with the South African choir that's 24 pieces. I have these ethnic. I have these groove percussion players that are playing that I have whole separate sessions for. I have specialty woodwind, the woman who plays the Lion King book in London in the orchestra pit there. I had her come in and record the ethnic, sorry, the specialty woodwind parts, and she's amazing. And so I have all of this stuff to deal with, recording wise, so that's 2 weeks of recording. And the good news is, um, like the cues we did were like the opening of the film. We did the race, which is I suppose we shouldn't do too many spoilers, but there's a moment where there's a bonding moment between, yeah, I can't
Yeah,
say
it's
too
a
much. Yeah, yeah, you know what I mean. But we do a bunch of cues that turned out pretty well, I think, and so the studio is ecstatic, the director is ecstatic, Tom is ecstatic, so I'm happy, but I still have the, 90 minutes of music to write or something like
yeah.
that. So anyway, so that's how it goes, then it just keeps going. I had to be done by, I think it was October 1st. I ended up writing 120 minutes of music for the film.
Wow. Yeah,
And some it n not it has, like, 97 minutes or something of score, but the reason I had to write the extra minute music is that scenes I would write music for a scene that then would get changed,
sure.
that they would throw out the scene, and so the music got thrown out, and they'd have a new scene that brought in, so I'd have to write new music for that scene, so that's why there was so much music. But, at the end of the day, I think everybody was happy, um,
Yeah.
and, it was a lot of pressure.
Yeah, well, well, first of all, there's a lot of pressure because there's the whole shadow of Hans Zimmer and Elton John, right? And
Yeah.
did you do the songs for Lynn too, or with?
Actually, the Mark had done the songs.
Ah,
And so that was one thing. So Mark did the songs, the exception being the only 2 that I were brought in on were, N Ngomso, which is the
yeah,
beginning of the film, just
beautiful
'cause
intro, by the way. Yeah,
oh, thanks. Yeah, they just wanted me to do some more orchestral thing to tie into the score. And then the one that I really, sort of did the full redo of was Bye Bye.
gotcha. Oh,
And
yeah,
so yeah. And so those were the 2 songs that I was brought in. Mark did everything else on the song production front, along with Len, of
yeah.
course, and Lebo. I'm trying to remember you asked a question, I'm trying
I
to
said,
think.
so, well, I said, I kind of, it was
Oh,
my fault. I kind of, but
oh,
there's pressure because A,
right,
it's a huge movie, and
right,
B, because, there's The Lion King, which will
right,
always be such a classic. And,
right,
how do you balance, paying respect to,
right.
Hans and Elton John versus putting the own Dave Metzger spin on it?
Right, and I believe that's exactly why I got hired, you know,
Ah,
because I have lived The Lion King for 28 years
it's,
in because of the Broadway thing, so they knew that obviously, and so I was the natural person, especially since I'd just done Wish, which was, successful in their happiness world.
yeah,
So, they knew that I know The Lion King like the back of my hand, really, going before Mufasa.
yeah,
So there was some comfort for them there. And then I, it was a great opportunity, right? Because those themes that Hans wrote are iconic and
yeah,
they're incredible themes. So you can't lose, with that. So I knew that I had a head start, especially because I had a really pretty compressed schedule to write the score. So I was not complaining about like I get to use Hans's themes. Now at the end of the day, when the cue sheet was accumulated and tallied up, the cue sheet, which is how much who are the composers of all the music in the film. So that's always done at the end, and that's how the royalties are attributed. So at the end of the day, um, there only 14% of the score is Hans's themes,
mm,
and then there were Nick Patel had about 4% maybe, and then Elton John and, Tim Rice each had 1% each because I used Circle of Life in a couple of
sure,
spots. And so at the end of the day, 20% of the score is other people, but 80% of the score is my themes and my so it was actually kind of ideal. It was perfect for me because um have a lot of my music in there. I was able to do my arrangement spin on the iconic Lion King
Yeah.
themes, which I loved, having a chance to do. And I also really kind of looked strategically at it because I knew that the pieces of Hans's really would speak best at the beginning, especially at the beginning and at the end. So I knew those were my target kind of spots. So if I really, and then there's a lot of little snippets I will allude to, one of Hans's themes for like 4 seconds here or there
Hmm.
throughout. And so, which is, I believe, is the responsibility of somebody in my spot there, right? You would be doing disservice if you wouldn't.
Of course.
Have those things, and that's what brings us into the Lion King world. It keeps us there as a viewer or as a listener, so I think, at the end of the day, I was happy with the way it turned out. Disney was really happy with the way it turned out, which is nice,
Yeah.
I'm
It's
very
great.
thankful for that, and Barry was happy, and, so it was kind of, Jonathan, like you said, it was kinda like, I would have been happy if Wish was kinda it, that would have
Yeah.
been, "Oh,
Yeah.
man, my dream was fulfilled." And so then to have one more chance to do something was, just icing on the cake, gravy, whatever you wanna whatever phrase you wanna say, and
But it was also just a beautiful full circle moment, right? You kinda started with Disney
yeah,
doing Lion King on Broadway, and now you have this big, huge tentpole movie where you're able to, like you said, at the back of your hand, you
yeah,
can tip your cap to the people before you, put
yeah.
your own thumbprint on it. It's just a beautiful way to kind of do the full circle.
Yep, I agree, and
Yeah.
thank you for saying that. I feel very much that way,
Yeah.
that it was the best of all worlds, and, you know, and, so, I can't really tell you what I'm working on or
I was gonna
someone
ask,
else.
yeah, but I was gonna
Yeah,
ask, but just say what you can.
yeah, I'll say what I can, and that's that if if nothing else were to happen from this point on,
Yep.
I would be ecstatic, fulfilled, all that. I think I'm gonna have some more opportunities coming up that
Great.
are a continuation of the sort of the path that things are going and have been on, and and working with people that I really, really dearly love, and so, none of our lives is known, right? I mean, it's all this, this path, and a journey that we don't know what's gonna happen, but I am incredibly thankful and unbelieving of what opportunities I've been given,
Yeah.
and it's like the dream come true, and I think back to when I was a 12-year-old starting writing, and when I was a 16-year-old and I saw, Star Wars and all of these dreams that I had, I really can say that really they all have come true, and most importantly, my family, I have this incredible family, and I've got 2 great kids that are really contributing, to society, in their work and in trying to in being positive in the world. My wife is amazing.
Yeah.
She's like, my rock, and, like, has been so supportive and understanding and has gone through a lot, like missing, me. I guess she had a good time in France,
I
without me still,
Her
but
and the kids, I mean, it's okay, right?
right, exactly, but it's like, and so, if I get a couple more things in the future that, continue on this path, it's all just, special extra stuff, and, I don't know. I don't know what else I can say,
Yeah, that's fine. Well, I'll just say, like, I hope to see some more Dave Metzger music, composed by in the future. If that, so I guess put it this way, this is a good segue. If that's the case, Dave, how can people find you, follow you, learn about what you're doing when stuff officially does come out?
Yeah, I think, uh, I have a website, which I know is really old school, but it's, www.davemetzgermusic.com, right? Yeah, that's it. And so if anybody wanted to, you could just Google me, and that's probably gonna take you there. I am a very bad Instagrammer.
Mhm.
I Instagram very minimally, but that would be a place, I believe I'm just Dave Metzger, I think, or Dave Metzger music, it might be. I don't know. Again, it probably pops up, this is horrible that I'm so lame at that. I'm not a self-promoter. That's one of the reasons it might have taken me this long to get to where I got to, but so, people can look for me on Insta and find, and that is almost certainly where I would put any kind of news that would come up. It'd probably be Insta first, and,
I will make sure to put both of those links into the show notes when this comes out. So, no, of course. Dave, you've been so generous with the time. I've enjoyed the conversation so much. It's so educational, so inspiring, so wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time. Do me a favor if in the future if stuff does come out again, please come back on again and talk about it. We'd love to have you back.
that'd be my pleasure, Jonathan. And again, thank you so much for even thinking of being interested in talking with me. It's a joy and a pleasure, and I love speaking with somebody who's so passionate about this all as well.
It's been a pleasure. I will look forward to speaking with you again soon. And thank you so much for your time.
Great. Thank you very
All
much.
right. Thanks, Dave.
Have faith in your dreams, and someday your rainbow will come smiling through. No matter how your heart is grieving, if you keep on believing, the dream that you wish, part of your world, it calls me. I want so much more than they've got planned. I'm almost there. The dream that you wish will come true.
Thank you again to Dave Metzger for sharing his experience and his background and his amazing stories and the work that he's done. You can find Dave at davemetzgermusic.com. I'll put that information in the show notes. Check him out at that website for things he's done, things he hopefully will be doing in the future as well. And it was just a pleasure to have him on. So on to Disney music news for this week. You just heard at the very, very top of that segment, it was kind of a compilation of songs. That was from Disney Princess Week. There was very recently a one-of-a-kind concert at Disneyland Park. This happened last week. It was shown on YouTube, and it's now going to be shown on Disney Plus. There's a chance to enjoy a magical performance that occurred during Disney Princess Week. At Disneyland, it was a Disney Princess concert celebrating 70 years of Disneyland, which featured Disney Princess voice talent such as Alawi Carvalho, who's the voice of Moana, and Disney legends Jodie Benson, the voice of Ariel, Paige O'Hara, the voice of Belle, and Anika Noni Rose, the voice of Tiana, in honor of World Princess Week, but also in honor of the Disneyland Resort's 70th birthday celebration. Disney Princess stars came together for a spectacular performance of some of the most beloved Disney Princess music filmed in front of the iconic Disney Sleeping Beauty Castle. And it was hosted by Jennifer Goodwin, who's the voice of Judy Hobson's Utopia, as well as Snow White in Once Upon a Time, and also Susan Egan, who was the voice of Meg in Hercules, and the original voice and the original Belle in Beauty and the Beast on Broadway. So what you just heard was kind of a compilation of some of their songs coming together. The whole concert will be available soon. It might be actually available now on Disney Plus. Check it out. It was truly something incredible to see all those princesses together. There's also been some new information released about the Muppets taking over what used to be Aerosmith's Rock and Roller Coaster. Disney came out with a whole bunch of information, which I'll read to you. A lot of it is going to be a copy itself, but you'll get an idea of what they're trying to do here. So you have until next year to prepare, because Rock and Roller Coaster starring the Muppets comes speeding into Disney's Hollywood studios in 2026, fueled by the tasty tunes, the electric mayhem, and the high-speed hijinks of the Muppets. So if you're not aware, Disney decided to do a refresh and a redo of the Rock and Roller Coaster, which for as long as I can remember featured Aerosmith. It's a great ride, featured the music of Aerosmith and actually the band in the video at the beginning of the pre-show. Amazing roller coaster, until recently, until Guardians of the Galaxy came out, probably the most ambitious and scary, if you will, roller coaster in Disney World, including with an inversion. So they decided to do an upgrade and an update, and because they moved the Muppets out of its original home in Muppet Vision 3D, because that's being taken over by Monsters Inc. and Monstropolis, There's a lot of people, including myself, that love the Muppets from just a nostalgia perspective, as well as just a delightful, fun, irreverent group of things that always tend to make me laugh. So I think a lot of people are similarly of a similar mind. So they decide to just kind of cater to our generation, I suppose, and move the Muppets to a starring feature in the Rock and Roller Coaster. So it sounds like it's going to be involved Electric Mayhem, which is Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem Band. So the Electric Mayhem are headlining their biggest Hollywood concert ever. Anyone is in attendance to witness Animal, Dr. Teeth, and the rest of this groove-tastic group rock the house down. There's just one little problem: the band is nowhere to be found. So for fans of that, the huge Fender Stratocaster guitar in front of the ride, you'll be stoked to know that the newest residents of the Rock and Roller Coaster are putting their own spin on that ruby red paint job. A vibrant and psychedelic new design will grace the bottom of the guitar, inspired by a classic Muppet car paint job. And the piano motif at the base will feature a golden key as a nod to the certain far-out band leader, Dr. Teeth. With your VIP passes, you'll be welcomed inside the recording studio where, wouldn't you know it, you'll find the Electric Mayhem are cranking out some seriously rocking tunes, along with the finest audio engineers, all penguins, of course. We'll see Scooter doing his best to convince Electric Mayhem to stop jamming and get to their increasingly restless fans. But will it be enough to get the band across town on stage in time? Good question. With the help of our friends at Muppet Labs and a very fast limousine, we'll take a twisting, turning, and screamingly fun road trip across Hollywood to reach the concert in time. The iconic scenery and landmarks of Tinseltown will feature a Muppet twist, and throughout the journey, you'll hear Electric Mayhem playing some of the most iconic rockin' hits in your ears to keep the music and the adrenaline pumping. I'm sure G-Force Records will release a concert setlist soon. So that is all directly from Disney itself. So next year, it sounds like the transition is going to happen. I'm sure at some point they'll have the songs that are available. I will keep an ear out and let you know. But, I think most people are happy, I think, about a change. Change makes some people nervous, but also change sometimes is important at Disney, especially when you're taking the Muppets away. And if the people want Muppets they shall have, and it's going to be in the form of the Rock and Roller Coaster. So it tends to be maybe a little bit binary. Some people love it, some people hate it. Please let me know what you think and whether or not you will be riding it. And the last bit of news is that Disney California Adventure Park is kicking off Plaza de la Familia, which is a vibrant celebration honoring the spirit of Dia de los Muertos through music, food, art, and storytelling inspired by Pixar Animation Studios' Coco. From now through November 2nd, 2025, which also coincides, of course, with the Halloween holiday, guests can enjoy live music at the Paradise Gardens bandstand, themed craft activities, colorful decor, and a celebratory menu of Mexican cuisine at Paradise Garden Grill. Releasing in early September, there will also be a new Disney Pixar Coco collection that will introduce new apparel, accessories, headwear, and more inspired by the film. You can also sing and dance along as the storytellers of the Plaza de la Familia celebrate the musical world of Coco, which is a street performance that brings to life the everlasting bonds of family. After each performance, guests may pose for photos and make new memories with Miguel, brought to life as a hand-animated dimensional figure. Frontierland in Disneyland Park also pays tribute to Dia de los Muertos by adorning the area near Rancho del Zocalo Restaurante with skeleton figures, brilliant marigolds, and other decorative items typically displayed on ofrendas. So a great combination of Halloween and Dia de los Muertos. As far as I'm concerned, anywhere in Disney, the more Coco, the better. It's absolutely one of my favorite movies, if not, in my opinion, my favorite Disney/Pixar movie of all time. Not only because it involves music, the emotion of it is so amazing, as I'm sure you've heard me talk about often. So I won't start crying as I chat about it. But the cool thing is, I mentioned a hand animated dimensional figure. I've seen a video of it, and the best way to describe it is if you've happened to seen a video of The Lion King on Broadway, and you see how the puppeteers animate Timon and Pumbaa, there is an actor or a puppeteer standing behind it's not really a marionette, but he stands above it, and they're kind of attached to his front, and as the person or he or she move their hands, they manipulate the character as well, probably about waist or chest high behind them. So that's kind of what's going on with this particular Miguel animated dimensional figure. So it's going to be amazing. I don't think any way you do Coco, it's hard to screw it up because it is so great. That's going to be from now until November 2nd. Check it out and please let me know what you think. And that is it for Disney Music News for this week. Well, that's it for this episode of the Music Behind the Magic podcast. Thanks again to Dave Metzger for joining us. And as we conclude this 40th episode, a special thanks to all of you again for listening and supporting this podcast and for helping me continue to build this community. Please reach out to me with questions or comments and tell me what you'd like to hear more about for future episodes. I'm also sure everyone is now fully back into the swing of things with summer over and school in full effect, so I hope everyone's able to enjoy the fall. Hey, it's football time after all, it can't be all that bad. So with that, I look forward to speaking with you all again soon, and in the meantime, have a magical musical day.